Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast.
All right, Dan, I don't know about you, but that was just quite the episode with Pat Malloy. Holy smokes. That guy just thinks the game on a whole different level. For me, I think the big thing was the fact that he just asked so many questions. Like, we were asking him a question, and he's coming back with, well, what do you think about this and that, and all these different questions where he really gets you thinking. And I think that's probably why he's been so successful through the years, is how many questions he's able to ask and get people thinking and have that collaborative approach.
For sure. We talked for like 45, 50 minutes, but it felt like it could have gone on for hours and hours longer, just because every answer he gave, there was just so much to dive into. So that was awesome. He had so many interesting, not just like quotes, but ideas. One of my favorites, what do you do to afford yourself time on the ice? I think is like something that as a coach, as an instructor, that like, it's one thing to like, we want to make our players better, but that's kind of like the how and the why behind what we're doing. I think that's like so important. And then at the end, he said, there's no bad students, just bad teachers. I think that's like one of those like gut punch quotes that like everybody needs to understand. And I thought that he was just a fantastic interview.
I think that's a great way to put it, especially for coaches, but for players to take away from this. We don't want obedient players. If a coach wants you to be an obedient player to the T, you do this, and this, I think that you're in a wrong environment. You need to find a place where, yeah, you do have to do structure and there's the team aspect of it, but having the ability to explore your skill set, I think that's something that you have to take away, put yourself in a great environment like that. And things where you're feeling almost mentally tired as much as you are physically tired after practice. So I was a big fan of Pat. Again, I think we could have gone on for 5 hours. I feel like most people are like, oh, we could go on for hours and hours, but Pat seemed like, man, we could just go and it could be a full 8-hour day.
For sure. Without further ado, here's our wide-ranging interview with Pat Malloy.
All right. Welcome to the podcast. Pat, good to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're very excited. I know you've done a ton of work. You've got a million different titles. So curious to hear about your journey so far and where you're currently at and what your current roles and titles are.
Yeah, feels like forever. I guess I probably started in the development game early 2000s. Where I'm at today and where I was, I'd like to say I'm someone that sort of paid my dues and come up, I won't say the hard way, but there's really, the quality of my work has always been something I prided myself on. And I didn't have a 1,000-game NHL career to fall back on in terms of opportunities. So everything that I've had to accomplish, I've had to do, number one has been word of mouth and just sort of quality of work that I've done with players over the years has sort of vaulted me from one position to the next. I started way back when in junior A as a director of player development. And that was sort of spawned on by individual work that I had done. And, I've been everywhere from that to the National Hockey League. Now with my second club, I'm a player development consultant with the Ottawa Senators. Spent 4 years with the Buffalo Sabres, Hockey Canada, and did some work in Major Junior last year in Gatineau, and of course have a roster of individual clients, both Major Junior and National Hockey League players. that'll do private consulting with me and whatnot. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And I guess you could say I'm a lifer at this point.
Jeez, too many. I don't know. I'm not even sure how you keep up with yourself, let alone anyone who's trying to track you. It's crazy.
There was one point. I mean, I've always, individual development and that's always kind of been my passion. And, hockey's a funny world. As soon as you start to have some success with players, team opportunities had come. And so, I've bench coached and I've been a general manager at the tier 1 junior A level in Canada. And I currently do that as well. And it's a different challenge and certainly a neat challenge to build a club and, to try to be able to implement and see through, from a team perspective, and build that way. But I would certainly say my passion's always, been in individual development and player development, as it were. Helping players earn what they get versus being in charge of distributing what they get has always been something that, has been fulfilling for me. So, I mean, currently today, it's the Ottawa Senators. I'm very involved with Hockey Canada, coaching coaches, coaching players. The Smith Falls Bears, as a associate head coach and general manager of that club. I operate a place called the Peak Center for Human Performance here in Ottawa. And what it is it's a high performance institute, but we also have a day academy. So really adhering to the long-term athlete development model and starting with kids as early as grade 4 and going right through high school to grade 12 is really been intriguing because it allows you to sort of start at a young age and work through, levels of learnability and teachability in players and do a lot of different things and not just get finished product players. And one of the, the things I've been most proud of is, player that you'd meet at 10 years old and going through the process and following guidelines of the LTAD and really getting an opportunity to grow them through versus, being introduced to a player that's already a high achiever. It's a different journey and it's certainly fulfilling as well.
Man, there are so many ways to go from there. There's so much to digest there. That's awesome. I guess I'm most curious, you've worked with guys at all ages, all different skill levels. Like what do you maybe like about working with, young kids versus AHL? Like, what are the pros and cons that you see?
Young players are an open book. As I'm sure you guys are aware, hockey's is the word diluted industry in that, there's anybody with a bucket of pucks and a following is now a skills coach or skating coach or development coach. And those words get thrown around and, there's really no measure on many of the people that are in the industry in terms of is what you're doing working and why. So I like young players specifically for the fact that, they're an open book. Number one, you have an opportunity to do things right and to challenge conventional thinking, in doing one-speed drilling or obstacle-based drilling and all these sorts of things that really have no bearing on a player's ability to succeed going forward. I think, research shows that, the more you read on the topic of developing athletes and developing their mind and developing their aptitude for something, you realize a lot of what's being done in hockey is archaic and it's not effective. And so that is something I've enjoyed about younger players. From the older players' perspective, one of the things is challenging them to see through some of the things that they've developed as habits that are maybe not optimized habits or habits that have allowed them to hit a ceiling and not push beyond that and challenge them to see things a little differently. I'm really, really big on evidence-based. I see so much out there where, do as I say because I said so. And I think that's really not conducive to developing anything or anyone. There's got to be evidence-based in my view. If you're going to do something, there needs to be evidence to the fact that this is why it will help and this is how it will help you succeed and this is how it'll enhance your ability to perform. And if you don't have that evidence, it's guessing and guessing is, for all intents and purposes, I view that as stealing. If I'm guessing or I'm making it up as I go and I have nothing to base in terms of evidence of your gameplay or evidence of the way that you move or the things that you need to do and associate it with things done at a higher level, then it's all placebo effect if there is success.
That's well said. And I want to dig into that a little bit more about evidence-based development, evidence-based learning. What does that look like for you? Where are you pulling it from, and how are you going to implement that?
So, I mean, I don't generally do hockey camps or sign up for my clinic and I'll take your money and you get to come out. I typically won't touch on an athlete in their development unless I can get to know them as a player. So one of the first things that I'll ask is, can I see footage of your games? Can I see 5 games is sort of a minimum standard for me. Can I see what you do, how you move, what you deem as success? And what I'll look at is high consequence events. You know, do you create them? Are you involved in them? Are you a robot on the ice? Does the things that you do that you deem as success, are they things that will allow you to succeed at another level, at a higher level? If you're currently at the highest level that's available to you, you know, can you perform better? Because hockey, I think, is one of those sports where there's no such thing as good enough. If you had 50 last year, why didn't you get 51? So for me, I'm always looking for performance pathways. Does your habit base match what your aspirations are as a player? And that comes where I'll do a deep dive on how your shifts occur, what you do on a very consistent basis, and is there things that can be improved upon from that perspective? Do you play the game in a high consequence area? Do you have the ability to get to high percentage areas versus low percentage areas? Does your skill set allow you to dictate terms of play? And those are sorts of things that I'll start to address on our first meeting with a player, versus just, let's do this drill or get a, do all the sizzly looking stuff for the internet that gets me on the internet. And, I like to think that it's a little bit more like a doctor-patient privilege, in that I'm asking you to be vulnerable and adopt new ideas. I'm asking you to do a deep dive and self-evaluate. And I like to keep those things in terms of our interactions based on evidence, based on raw data that allows and lends you to learn a little bit more about yourself and the way you play. And then we formulate a plan based on, all right, here's what we know about you. Here's what we know about where we're trying to go to. Here's the parts of your game that will translate to success at another level, and here's the parts that won't. And you hear a lot about this now. I don't know that for me that's changed a lot in the last, since when I started in the early 2000s. I don't think that particular foundational component of my evaluation would have changed. I know it gets a lot of airplay now, and in various centers, there's more media than others, but I think that just solid foundational teaching and concepts, you either sort of adopt the idea that we're going to do things based on evidence, or you're going to do them based on thought. And if it's thought, you better do a heck of a job confirming that why you're doing what you're doing is going to help performance. Otherwise, especially, you get to the National Hockey League level, the day I can't talk to an athlete about how this is going to impact them and bring them along that journey is the day that I'm done. Because it's just, time is money for them, in that, they don't need someone running them through drills. And that's a lot of, how my clientele is built, is that performance needs to be the key indicator that, that if we can push that needle based on things that we've done and discovered in terms of pathways to success together, then we know we're on to something.
That's so awesome. These are things that I talk about with some of my clients, and talking about translatable skills, because just because you got 50 goals at one level doesn't mean it's going to translate to the next. If you're getting to a net and just standing there, that's not going to take you where you want to go. You got to time it out, figure out those types of things, have those abilities that really allow you to dictate the terms of play, just like you said. So I'm kind of curious, and Dan, I don't know where you stand on this, but more understanding about kind of what that process looks like for you. Obviously, you said when you're beginning that relationship, you want to watch game film, you want to see how they play and how they go about it, and build that relationship. But what is maybe the skill analysis? Are you bringing numbers to them? Are you bringing pieces of ideas? How does that look?
Yeah, what I like to do is when I look at their game film, it's to figure out, number one, what's a high occurrence event for them, like things that they do often, things that they don't do much of. Um, I watch specifically, quality of first touch is something that I talk a huge amount with players about. So, you'll get a player and I want to produce more offense. Generally, what we'll see as a client is I want to produce more numbers. So when you start to do a skills analysis of, is there technical deficiencies in the way they move? One. Number two, if on retrievals is something that I'll look at a ton of, because is there skating issues? Are you not getting there because you can't? Are you not getting there because you won't? Are you skating the game, or are you just trying to do everything at 100 miles an hour? So when I look at those high occurrence events, then I'll start to look at, all right, what are we doing on first touch? What things are we doing that contribute to potential success, or no success at all? And so quality of first touch is something that I'll really talk about. So intrinsic things of threat assessments, gathering information, what things do you do to afford yourself pockets of time to create plays? Or are you just racing to pucks to get rid of pucks, to get back to a puck, to get to an area? Are you playing the game like a robot, or are you playing it like a high achiever? And so, oftentimes you'll see at the National Hockey League level, everybody can skate, pass, and shoot, but why are some players high achievers and others aren't? And it often will come back to quality of first touch and decisions upon, what they do on that first touch. And so a lot of that is something that, I think, especially growing up and seeing how things are done at Major Junior and seeing how things are done at the American League, and seeing, when you get to the National Hockey League, everybody's trying to fill a role. And sometimes those roles aren't what a player wants. And so we've got to identify, do you have the skill set from a raw perspective to fulfill the role that you're looking? Do you have the mindset to fulfill the role that you're trying to get to? And then, do you see the game in such a fashion that your movements create opportunity, or do they create deficiency for you in that, can I create a pocket of time for myself or for a teammate versus, yeah, I'm the fastest guy in the rink, but I accomplish very little.
Yeah, I like that you repeated that too. What do you do to afford yourself pockets of time on the ice? I think that's like the essence of today's game in a nutshell. Because like you said, everybody can skate at the NHL level. Everybody can do the fundamentals at least a level that got them there in the first place. But it's that little nuance that makes all the difference in the world. I want to switch gears a little bit. You said that one of your pet peeves, and certainly ours too, is the idea that skills coaches are a dime a dozen, bucket of pucks. They have a shtick, they run through it. But you mentioned earlier that you've been coaching coaches. I'm curious what that's looked like for you, just like good and bad or otherwise.
It started sort of from a private perspective, where, associations and things would get a hold and say, hey, would you present and different things. And I have always believed to give back. And then I got involved with Hockey Canada from the instructional side of things, and have started to conduct clinics for them. And I won't say that I go off script on that, because some of what they have is very good. Others is sort of drill based and scripted. What I would say is I challenge coaches to think a little differently, to not live out of a drill book, to understand, and there's no disrespect meant to any associations or Hockey Canada or Hockey USA or any of these places, but what I think it is important is that we give them more than drills. We give them processes in order to impact players in a positive way. And I think a lot of that comes from the power of peer coaching. The power of helping someone expand their thought process on something. And I don't proclaim to be right on everything, but I do proclaim to ask questions, to challenge people to think outside the box, to get away from cone-based drilling, from obstacle-based drilling, from go here, stop here, do this, memorize drilling. The game is not memorized, and challenge our coaches to create scenarios where kids have to solve problems and create an ice full of problem solvers versus an ice full of obedient athletes that go here, turn left, go here, turn right, stop here, stop there. That's not the game. And those players, albeit, some players get to the highest level of the game based on their ability to fulfill a very finite role. But I had it's interesting. He's a friend of mine, and he was the director of scouting in Buffalo. And when I was with the Sabres, Rob Murphy's his name. And he said one day we were casually chatting, and he says, we were talking about different roles and things. And he says, well, we don't take a checker out of junior and create a checker in the NHL. Oftentimes it's a guy that scored 50 in junior and he becomes a really good role player at the National Hockey League level, because their trajectory hit a spot where maybe they couldn't create at the National Hockey League level in terms of offense, but they did have the smarts and the intrinsic value of a player that could fill a role, but they weren't role players when they came from junior. And so, one thing I'll try to do is bring coaches into the new form of thought is it's not for us to decide a player's trajectory. It's up to us to challenge and push forward. They'll hit the level of talent. They'll hit the limit of their talent at a certain point, but it's not for us to create role players in and I guess they've changed the names now, the U10s and 12s and 14s and these sorts of things, Pee-wees, Adams, Bantams. It's not for us to decide those. It's up to us to try to create trajectory for these players. And if we have them solving problems and doing things that occur in games at a young age, we've got a better chance to do that.
Wow. That's deep. That's exactly what we're talking about here in the Hockey IQ podcast. How do we get away from just doing skills and make them think, and what those things are? I'm assuming that's maybe the difference between guys that make it in the NHL and those that maybe get stuck at the AHL level. Is there anything kind of specific to that? I'm assuming it's not just technique and physical.
It's interesting. That's a great question. And I talk to players that are, I don't know if they know that they're tweeners, but they're tweeners. Players that are, why do some players vault to the National Hockey League? Why do other players take time? I'll ask that question of players. And of course, I'll ask the question, but I'll also see it with my own eyes. Is the American Hockey League slower? No, it's probably not slower physically. It's a touch slower mentally, though. The National Hockey League, you've just got that much more less go and more fast when you should be fast, where you should be based on the play that's developed. So the processing, in my estimation, is just that much quicker. The physical skills are often, virtually similar in that, I think we see it every year at the skills competition. The fastest skater in the American League is darn close to the fastest skater in the National Hockey League. Hardest shots are right there with one another. But those aren't the things, why is the fastest skater in the American League still in the American League? Sometimes you need just to be fast at the right times, and you need to be fast about the right things. And I think it's almost cliche now for the people in the industry that speed of mind, speed of hand, speed of foot. That's, if as a skills person, as a development professional, that's not on your plate, you're late to the party. I think, understanding that linking or synergizing those three systems is where you really start to succeed in terms of developing a player, when you can link mind, hand, and feet. And sometimes, I think we've all seen, played with, been witness to the fastest player on the ice that accomplishes absolutely nothing. Faster is not better. Fast at the right time is really important. Fast with the proper hand or foot or mind, or getting to a spot fast, because that's what the situation demanded, and you had the wherewithal to be able to process that. That's when you really start to know that we're cooking with gas.
I want to stay on this topic because I think there's a ton here. You mentioned earlier that one of the benefits of teaching kids is that they're like a blank slate, right? And for that reason, they're kind of enjoyable to teach. They're sponges. On the other hand, you're working with guys all the way up to the NHL level. I think that's really interesting because most people that we talk to don't have that huge wide of, of experience. Do you find that it's maybe easier to teach hockey sense to one group over another because they're totally different? But, I could see it going either way.
I talked about that sort of about paying your dues. I mean, I think there's something to be said with, the teaching process of teaching a young player all the way to a National Hockey League player versus maybe, I played, so now I got a job with a National Hockey League team. Therefore I know because I did. And I listen, I have the most respect in the world for people that earn their living playing at the greatest level of our game. But at the same time, nobody just becomes a surgeon. A surgeon learned from someone. And so, to me, it's important to recognize experience of what's your teaching process. How do you get through mental blocks? How can you find pathways to performance for someone that's got a limited ability in one of their technical areas? What do I do if I'm not the fastest player, or I'm not even in the top 10th percentile of being the fastest player? Can I still contribute and play? And so, I think it's that there's no one size fits all. And so sometimes you'll see, especially in the development world, the cookie cutter approach where your body, your talent level, your athletic ability are different than mine, are different than Greg's, are different than Joe's, are different than Bob's. And so for us to cookie cutter approach, that's very difficult. And I think a lot can be said for learning from a younger age, and how does something progress in terms of the technique into the tactic, into the application, into the performance, from stage to stage and ability to ability. Because a lot of times, when I first meet a new player, let's say a kid gets drafted at 18 years old and you meet him for the first time at development camp. He has a lot of predisposed thoughts on how I should play to succeed, all the people that have impacted him along the way. One of the things, and I try not to, maybe it's to my detriment, I don't really do social media as well as some. I don't know if that's even the right way to look at it, but one of the things I'll say is turning players into pros. A lot of times faster, bigger, stronger, faster is you get those kids and they think, okay, I'm 18 and I'm drafted and now I just got to go. Sometimes it's slowing them down. Sometimes it's helping them recognize that being a professional has a lot to do with a lot of different things. And sometimes you have to slow down. Sometimes you have to do things a little differently than you think, especially if what you're looking to do is be someone that does more than chip and charge, or, become a checker, or, you want to push the needle and you want to be on the score sheet. Well, hope is not a strategy.
That's absolutely wonderful. And those are actually some of my greatest breakthroughs, is taking guys that just want to go. Because all they hear is play fast. Yes. It's getting them to just slow down. I had one kid here in Cleveland, and he's phenomenal. But every time we'd play, you'd watch him go through the neutral zone. He was just trying to pick up as much speed as possible. And the greatest breakthrough was just literally stopping his feet through the neutral zone once he had those first 3 quick steps. So he started to manipulate the gap a little bit. Yeah, so I couldn't agree more on that. That's awesome. I want to hear maybe some more about that, because that's one thing with guys that are super fast, or maybe some guys that need the opposite, where they need to speed up their game.
It's I talk about, I have a Play Fast Friday where what I'll do is I'll put pearls of wisdom out, if you will, but it has really nothing to do with skate fast, shoot fast. It has everything to do with the things that allow you to play the game faster. And so much of it is about patience and controlling tempo and controlling pace, and ultimately dictating the terms of play come from manipulating and being deceptive. And I know some of these are buzzwords, but it's putting some context to what that looks like and what that means, because my city, your city, North America is full of skating coaches, and it's go, 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 go fast. All of what I just said is true in the skills perspective side of things. And you see when you get to a team setting, it's recognizing that high percentage hockey is it's a combination of a lot of things, and it all doesn't revolve around being the fastest from A to B. And that's been one of the most interesting parts of my journey is, coming into a new environment, meeting an NHL coach that wants to know what's going on, what are you doing with the players and why. Getting to the American League, what's viewed as development there, why are we doing this, or major, junior, in all the different levels. And hockey's in an interesting crossroads, I think, in that you still have the elements of the old and the emergence of the new. I think a lot of what we're talking about is some of the new mindset, which will become the norm at some point, I truly believe. But there's still the mindset that, put a puck in an area and win a race. And, and you see that going on right now in the playoffs. You see various styles of coaching, various styles of how the game is played. And that's the interesting part of hockey is that, yes, you can have success in certain areas, but is it sustainable? When you look at the best players in the world, they're not winning races just because they're the fastest. They're not, they're in control. They have the puck and they manipulate the movements of other people. And I'll say things like they play chess, not checkers. And, it's always so interesting to watch and to see and to get the mindsets of different players and what their perspective on things is. And it's pretty interesting when you work with a world-class offensive player versus just a National Hockey League player who, all due respect, are one of the top 700 players in the world because they're in that league, but they often, on the very same league will have such a vastly different approach to what they would deem as success. And, a lot of times I'll talk about that idea that the very same people that want a role fulfilled will be the same ones that if you don't produce would be the ones saying to you, we're going to go in another direction at some point. And so from a private perspective, within a team perspective, obviously we've got guidelines and things that you want to make sure, but you always want to push the envelope. I've always believed that better player, better team. And, it's kind of the idea, if you were building a car, better components, better engineering, better finished product. And that's really, for me, what I would say when developing someone is that if, the part in that car is that we've built the aptitude to be able to extend our possession just a period of time long enough to allow my hockey sense to kick in to find the play. A lot of times when you get to a 30-year-old man, it's very difficult to impact his hockey sense in a super dramatic way because they've done things certain ways for 30 years. And so there's a lot of pathways that you're going to maybe run out of time to be able to change or rewire. So one of the ways that I would approach someone like that would be, can I get you to a puck just a split second sooner? Because maybe you don't read the game quite as quick as the player next to you. But if I can figure out a way, or I shouldn't say I, because it's really the journey that we take together. Can we collectively figure out a way to build those pockets of time that maybe afford the level at which you process the game to make the play appropriate with producing? And that's another thing that, as you get players further on in their career, it becomes a time sensitive thing in that you don't have the same time or the same amount of runway as you would with a 12-year-old, if that makes sense.
For sure. I think it's so interesting what you said about how the game's changing. That's something that we can all appreciate. Like, I remember I've been a bench coach now for a handful of years, and like we've had to change the way that we check, literally physically body check, because, I'm 30. When I was brought up, this is how we played. And so that's like what you teach, and you're like, oh, actually I'm a dinosaur. Like this is not how we play. So I think that you're right. The game's changed. Is there anything that and it's continuing to change, what's something or some things that, maybe you've changed your mind about over the last couple of years?
You know, when I read that question and I thought about it, it's interesting. My mind goes to the spot that, you know, fitting in and fulfilling a role, and you don't want to overstep your bounds in a team setting for sure. But I've often felt that, you know, in the pursuit of a better player, if you can provide evidence that the things you're doing are helping these players improve their ability to perform, and not just offensively, you're seeing more now than ever, roles are being given to higher end players because the way they distribute their skill set, the smarts that they apply in the way they play can be used to kill penalties. It can be used to do, you know, shutdown. If you have the puck, then, you know, your shutdown, you know, in the old days you'd say, well, you know what, I'm going to put the shutdown line out. We're just going to go and they're going to eat pucks and, you know, they're going to block shots and all the things, you know, they're tough and they're just going to bleed shots and hopefully we run out of time and we win the game. Well, you know, if you possess the puck, it means the other team doesn't. And, you know, what things from a skills solving perspective can I solve a problem because I possess it, or I cut things off before they become dangerous? And so, you know, things that I've changed my mind about is not to allow conclusions to be drawn on a player. If a player has a genuine and distinct interest in improving in an area, who am I to tell them that this is what you are as a player? This is all you are as a player. Now, I think, you know, especially from a professional standpoint, they're all mature enough to recognize, you know what, I want to stay, I want to play. And if, as long as they understand that I have a role as defined by a staff that I need to fulfill, how do I build into a role that I want versus the one that I have without sacrificing the one I have for the one that I'm looking for? And so to me, that's been one of the most distinct changes, is that how can we develop you to hit another level of achievement without taking away your effectiveness in the role that you've currently been given that, you know, contributes to your livelihood. So that's certainly something that's a fine line. You know, I think we've all seen it, hockey purists, and by purists, I mean maybe, you know, the older school generation is, how many times have you heard, you know, oh, the skills guys coming in today, so it'll all be saucer passes and turnovers. When in essence, and I've heard that in the last 5 years in an NHL setting, and you know, politely, I forwarded video of the session to say, actually, what we were doing is learning to properly endure incidental and intentional contact to prolong possession so that we could make a play or distribute a puck or access an area in a high percentage area of the ice so that we could drive the numbers of scoring opportunity up. That's what we were actually doing. I don't think we threw one saucer pass, and I wasn't doing it to be cheeky or coy, but there are those in our industry that there's a professional standard, and it isn't jumping over stuff and flipping pucks and saucing pucks and spinoramas. And that was the old view of skills. So from that perspective, it's making coaches, and listen, all the respect for the stress that they endure, they want to win games. And so it's very difficult. You know, we all understand the fraternity of hockey, and nobody wants to give up control when they've got a player playing a certain way. They don't want them to deviate because it's this mystical thing that if we cross a line and then we don't have success, let's assess blame. For me, it's everybody, all the stakeholders recognize that, you know, as a player, their want to improve shouldn't come sacrificing the foundation that they've built within the lineup. But I think it's not fair to anybody if you don't, you know, look from an evidence-based standpoint, from a challenging the player standpoint, from a what can we do today in terms of the way we coach a player versus the way we might have done it 10 years ago to find new pathways to performance. Because if we're not sacrificing foundational, but we are adding elements and we are adding stories to the house, you know, better component, better product, better player, better team, in essence.
That's wonderful. I love the aspect of like building out of a strength and continuing to go from that. So I'm a huge fan of that. Dan, sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're good. I like that analogy too. I was curious, like, do you think that, next 5 years maybe, that you'll continue to see, less pushback from the quote unquote dinosaurs in the game? Or do you think it's like something that we're looking at for a long period here go forward? Or like, I'll like, from my standpoint, like I think that it's like every year it gets less and less of that, but I don't know when it'll just be like, oh yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. Do you know what I mean?
I think, and it's maybe not fair, and I don't mean to sound dinosaurs at the top level. I just see it throughout, in that there still seems to be sort of an us versus them mindset, in that
For sure.
if you take an analytical approach or an evidence-based approach, oh, you're one of those new guys.
Yeah.
Well, hang on a second. I don't go to the doctor and just ask for pills because I feel sick. That is one way, for sure. And I guess, to me, as a skills professional and a skating professional, and I would say just a development person, and I think, when I read through your material, I think we're all on the same page that let's make sure we diagnose the basis of where a player hits the wall in terms of performance, and see if we can find root cause and build from there, versus kid can't play. Kid can't do that. No, can't play. Well, okay, but coach, it's our job to find pathways to performance. So if I had $1 for every coach, no, kid can't play. No, he's a fourth liner. Like, that's all he is. Okay, at a young age, that's, to me, almost unacceptable, because there's no bad students, there's just bad teachers. And so from the professional standpoint, listen, I get it. In the National Hockey League, not every fourth liner can be tweaked and skilled up to be Nikita Kucherov. It doesn't work like that. There's talent components, there's different technical and athletic things, and we understand that. However, everyone can enhance their ability to perform in the role they're in. And you think about the ability to improve a fourth liner to a third liner. What does that do to the depth in your organization? What does that do to your team? If you can get an American League player, a young player, able to play in a National Hockey League lineup, what does that do from a salary cap perspective? It's all about developing players to live within the confines of structure, for sure, but can they develop from that structure into better versions of themselves?
That is fantastic. And I love the idea of even going along the same lines of the NHL is continuing to build players. Once you sign them, you don't want to stop there, because you now need to get value above what you're paying them. And the same thing as you're talking about.
It's interesting, because draft and develop, I always get such a kick out of that. There's many organizations where draft and develop means you draft them, you put them in the American League, they play for a coach that's, probably had a ton of success in winning hockey games at a level, teaching them to be good pros. Good pro, show up to the rink on time, stay late, work hard, yes sir, serve the group. I mean, all of those intrinsic things that we'd almost see from I don't want to say a military unit, for instance. Show up on time. If you're not early, you're late. Play within the confines of the structure, sacrifice for the group. All those things are important in any high achiever. You make sacrifices, you work hard, but being on time, that's a life skill that everyone should have. Working hard, everybody works hard. No longer, that's not fair to say. Not everyone works hard, but you know what? A lot of people work really, really hard. What can you do to enhance your talent? What can you do to enhance your abilities? Are you staying late to stay late, or are you staying late to look at video, but not look at video and be harped on about all the things you did wrong, to look at it from a different lens and say, if I'd have done something just like this versus that, maybe outcomes would have been different, and show them evidence to, why I'm asking you to do the things I'm asking and what it creates when you do. When I talk about old school versus new school, you still see at the minor hockey level coaches that, I'm a volunteer, so I'm doing the best that I can, and, drills and do it hard. And okay, that's great. But, I've always been a believer that volunteer or not, if you volunteer for a job, it's a job. we're going to offer you the coaching job of this club at the U12 level. If you accepted it, you cannot use the excuse that, well, I'm just a volunteer. If you're going to do something, do it right. And so our job is to create an environment where players want to come to the rink, but we're challenging them to be uncomfortable. And not because we're making them uncomfortable, skating them up and down the ice until they don't feel comfortable anymore. Challenging them to see through a different lens. Can they solve problems? Can they do things in confined spaces? Can they see past that first wave of threat, that threat assessment concept, that it's, you know, the game now is played above the shoulders. And, you know, the industry doesn't really allow for people to fully understand that, I don't think, in that skating, skills, great. You know, the best players in the world, they just think better than everybody else. And that's, you know, something that if we put as much attention into that as we did to all the other areas in the game, I really truly believe that hockey would be better for it, and that players are going to benefit for it, because, you know, hockey is a really fun sport especially when you're good at it and when you get to touch the puck. And I'll say that, you know, I think I said it today on the ice. I said, you know, is there anyone on the ice that just loves chasing the puck? Like, I just love back checking. I just love never having the puck, never contributing to the outcome. I just love to chase things around. The odd time I get hit and my teammates will bang the boards because I got hit with a puck. Run into the odd thing here and there, and my teammates will bang the boards because I ran into somebody. But I really, you know, I didn't pass it. I didn't shoot it. I didn't get to carry it much. Does anybody love that about the game? And not one kid, of course, puts their hand up. No. So, you know, I think it's creating situations where they get to feel like I have some impact on the outcome. And that starts with coaches adopting the mindset that let's stop worrying about the messy beginnings and the mistakes that they'll make, and recognize that's part of the process. And, you know, I used to joke, you know, coaching minor hockey with my kids and stuff, to, you know, it's 9:30 on a Thursday night, and, you know, there's nobody coming out here to scout us coaches. So let's make sure the kids get something out of this, because the wins and losses on your Pee Wee AA team or wherever you happen to be, you know, at the end of the day, those aren't the things that you'll carry forward.
That is wonderful. And we, just based on the answer alone, need to unpack a lot more than we have time for. So I'm going to ask you a simple question that's probably got way too many layers for you. Because we got to wrap up at some point. So we'll get you back on, because I definitely want to unpack a lot of the things that you've talked about, not just that last question, but even ones before that. Yeah, I'm loving this one. So I guess my final question is, define skill. What is skill to you compared to maybe what people think skill is?
It's funny, you know, skill today, all the respect in the world for people that are trying to do what they believe is right. I just, you know, I have a real issue with apparatus as a teacher. I think that has to be dispelled. I have a real issue with things that don't naturally occur in the environment that we're training to be in, jumping and twisting and turning, and you know, I'm not going to go down that road, but what I see as skill is someone's intrinsic ability to solve a problem they encounter within the confines of our game in an automated fashion. So can you call upon, in an automated fashion, the skill required to make the play required to succeed? So, you know, does my skating afford me the ability to create time till that play comes? Can I beat the first person to make a high percentage first play? You know, can I call upon the passing or the shooting or the handling skills as determined as I read that the threat, you know, to my possession of the puck requires me to move it to the open player? Great. Does it, you know, am I in a position to shoot a puck because it's a high percentage area and it has a really good chance to go in? Or am I just shooting it to shoot it because coach yelled, shoot the puck, put it on the net, everything at the net, everything at the net? Quality versus quantity. So for me, you know, skill is, does the things you do afford you the opportunity to make a high percentage play? And obviously, you know, in my travels, I try to simplify as best I can what a higher percentage play is versus a lower percentage play as a general rule, you know, with the understanding of what real estate in the game looks like, areas of the ice, and, and just giving kids, the understanding of, if I'm in this area, my plays can have more consequence than if I'm in this area. And so can I skate, pass, shoot? Can I handle, manipulate, evade, deceive to get to the areas, or to distribute and control to the areas that allow us the most opportunity for that success? And so, to me, sometimes, especially when you're pouring the foundation, that's boring. The players, they want to jump over stuff because it looks cool on the internet. They want to, have their eyes glued down on the puck and do all the cool stuff that you see Patrick Kane do a little bit of it in a skills competition. The magic of a guy like Patrick Kane, he's doing it at game speed with his eyes up, manipulating your movement 8, 10, 12 feet before you're near him. He's got you moving the way he wants you to move. But the things that get sensationalized are, look at the quick hands with his eyes down in a shootout in the All-Star game. Well, yeah, that's candy versus the vegetables of, watch him, the poetic nature of the way he plays, the poetic nature of the way that all of the best players play is that they get people to do things that they don't want to do. So maybe in summary of what skill is, do I possess the physical abilities to get someone to do something they don't want to do, or that they're trained not to do because of the way I moved and the things that I did that made them do something they didn't intend upon doing, force them to that mistake?
That's an awesome answer. Love that. I think we could go for another hour here, but like Greg said, we'll have to get you back on because there's so much more to dig into. And I feel like every single one of your answers, we were just like, where do we go from here? Because there's so many different ways. So I really wanted to, thank you for coming on and, sharing your wisdom with us and our audience, because I think that a lot of people are going to really benefit from this.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, it's interesting times here. I've really, I won't say, it's a loaded statement. I haven't enjoyed COVID, but I've enjoyed the journey that I've got to take with players at various levels, just because it's sort of it slowed everybody down a little bit. And so it's been neat to be able to get into the trenches with various players and try to get them to see, their game through a different lens, and recognize that, foundation and all the different things we have the opportunity. And that's a lot of how I'm talking to players right now, is we have an opportunity to come out of this thing that we didn't control, this pandemic that we have no control, but we control our response. And so can we come out a better version of ourselves out of this? So that's been kind of neat. And I've really enjoyed this, and would love to join you anytime. Anytime you'd like to have me back. I always love talking hockey, and always love being challenged on different things, and I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Take care.
Very well, guys. Thanks, guys. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for tuning into the Hockey IQ podcast. We are Hockey's Arsenal, Greg Revac and Dan Dukart. Together, we've come together to create a platform and a community to expand our hockey intelligence, hockey IQ, whatever you want to call it. We're very passionate about seeing this game played smarter and better, and continue to develop itself to the next level and staying on the cutting edge of things. So you can find us at Hockey's Arsenal on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're also at hockeysarsenal.com. From there, you can find some resources and some options to work with us. We're excited to continue this. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, follow, and share. You can also join up for our newsletter as well, where we're going to tackle anything Hockey IQ related. So we're excited to have everyone here and continue to build.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.